My name is Nada Abukishk, and this is my story. Today on Discovering Palestinian Intellect, the special edition of Chatting with Slava the Jordanian on the Mindset Mastery Moments. Welcome back. I am your host, STJ. And allow me to introduce our special guest today, Nada Abukishk. Let me read you guys her biography. This way, I want to make sure that we got everything as far as her background. Nada Abukishk is an epidemiologist with the CDC Foundation in Boston, bringing over a decade of experience in global health and humanitarian settings. She spent 10 years with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency UNRWA, serving 5.6 million Palestinian refugees across the Middle East. Nada has led and contributed to projects addressing malnutrition, food insecurity, and non-communicable diseases, and has conducted brief nutritional work in Yemen and the Dominican Republic of Congo. She holds a Master of Medical Sciences in Global Health Delivery from Harvard Medical School and a Master's in Human Nutrition from the University of Jordan. Her research has been published in leading journals, including The Lancet and BMJ Open. Welcome, Nada, and thank you so much for coming over today.
It's my honor. Thank you.
Typically, this is all about storytelling. So share with us the story, how you ended up in the United States. My understanding is you are born to Palestinian parents in Texas, ended up going back to Jordan, and now you are back here in the U.S. So what happened?
So my family is tribal, it's called Abukishk from Jaffa. And after the Nakba, because it's a big tribal, so some of them went to north of Palestine, others went to north of Jordan, and also some, like part of my family, went to Tulkarem and Ramallah and Nablus, which is West Bank in occupied Palestine territory. So my parents, actually cousins. My mother is originally from Nablus, and my father, as I said, as Abukishk family from Jaffa. And then my father finished his high school and education in Nablus, and then they decided with his brothers and cousins to go to the U.S. to pursue their higher education. That's when, after he finished, worked there, my mom and dad got married, and then they spent 15 years in Houston, living, working, and studying. That's when all of us were born. But when our family left Houston, I was 4 years old, and we went back to Jordan, because it was like area of the time was like Arab Gulf were booming, and then there's like more job opportunities there. But most of the family lived in Jordan, and the parents worked in Arab Gulf. But I finished my education in Jordan. High school, bachelor's degree, and master's. So prime of my life and best time of my life, I lived in Amman, Jordan. So I feel myself as like half Jordanian, half Palestinian with a Palestinian heritage.
So you were born in Texas, and then at 4 years old, you went back to Jordan. What prompted you guys to go back to Jordan?
My family, as I said, they worked and lived for Houston for like 15 years. And when I was around 4 years old, that was the time in the 80s. I'm not going to say my exact year because it was my...
want you to.
It was like kind of the start or kick off the booming of Arab Gulf with the Gaza and everything. Most of the Arab families, at least to my knowledge, went like kind of like the parents went to the Arab Gulf for working, and some of the families, like the mother and the children, stayed in Jordan for education, and like more the community and the family there. So that's where I stayed in Jordan. My father worked in Arab Gulf, and then I finished my high school bachelor degree and master's in Jordan. So I did my bachelor in human nutrition because that is where that's the most topic that I feel like talks to me. And I feel like I love biology, I love chemistry, but then nutrition have a special part of my heart. So that's why I also pursued master's degree the minute I finished my bachelor. And even when I did the bachelor and master's, I also was working as a dietitian, just part-time, just for kind of more a passion I wanted to do.
When did you realize that this is what I wanted to do? As far as nutrition, did you get inspired because of the circumstances around being, Jordan so close to the West Bank and Palestine? Did you feel the passion? This is my duty. I want to really help people. According to your biography, you were in refugee camps too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I finished my master's in human nutrition, my kind of here exposing myself, but I was like living in a bubble. I didn't know much what I want to do, what kind of career I want to pursue. Should I go to private sector, which like there's more money and profit and like, you know what I mean? And then, or should I go more of helping people humanitarian sector? So because I was like very young and couldn't decide what I want, I actually pursued both. I applied to both. And I interviewed like both sectors, honestly. And then I got an offer. That's a funny story. Probably never told you that. I got a very good offer in Doha, Qatar, with a very good prominent hospital there with a good position, as like, I think I was 25 or 26. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I should go there. But I was like literally packing my luggage and planning to move to Doha when I received a phone call from the United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestinian refugees, where I interviewed and did a lot of exams and a lot of interview with WHO, World Health Organization, but I never thought I took the job. So I received a phone call and from Dr. Ali Khadr. I'll let you know why I said this name. He's amazing. He said, you got the job. You have a medical examination tomorrow. Do you accept the job? I said, yes. So I closed when I was like, wait a second, I should be traveling 2 weeks. What should I do? I was thinking. So I asked some of my clients, actually, they were chief of relief and work department. They were chief of department of relief and work at UNRWA. And I gave her a call, and she was like one of my, because I work as clinical dietitian in a medical center in Amman. And she said, this is a huge opportunity. It's the package is nothing compared to what you're going to get in Doha, but give it a try. You're going to be exposed to the WHO. On the one, I was like, why not? She said, like, you will love, the feeling of you're helping people, your people. So she kind of more encouraged me to take the offer. So I took the offer. And from there, I stayed 10 years. It was a 1-year contract to finish few projects. And from there, I was like, that's it. I got hooked up for 10 years. I can't speak more, but that's where I like kind of, you can say it's a butterfly effect, where my career shifted to more humanitarian in like malnutrition, NCD diseases, which is kind of the biggest problem that we have for like people 40 and above, hypertension, diabetes, and lifestyle, in refugee camp settings. In addition to food insecurity and malnutrition, which is like the biggest problems that faces Palestinian refugee camps, whether in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, West Bank, and other things that the reason why I stayed or got like a permanent job there, because I used to work at the headquarters in Jordan, where you kind of more exposed to the 5 fields. So the refugee camps in the 5 areas of Syria, Lebanon, West Bank, Jordan, and Gaza. When you work in the headquarters, you go to these fields and work to all parties and stakeholders and like partners in the 5 fields. And this was an eye-opening for me as a young, young Palestinian woman going to refugee camp. I'd never been to refugee camps before in Lebanon or in West Bank. That was an eye-opening for me, and I tried as much as possible to think out of the box, how we can utilize the donor money for the benefit of our people. I felt like sometimes, and I quote my boss, he said, I feel like the funding and donor money is like kind of your father money. You take as much as possible responsibility. You want to benefit the people from the donation or the funding that we have. So that's kind of more an umbrella of what kept me passionate about it and didn't go back to the private sector.
So going through the refugee camps, I can't even imagine going through refugee camps and seeing how our people are suffering. Of course, people are suffering all around the world, but you have that special connection with our people suffering. How did you manage when you went home to just detox from that? If I've been to the refugee, I don't want to leave them. Like it would be so hard for me to go back to my cushion life where everything is plentiful and all the resources are at my fingertips, where our people are suffering in the in the camps. How did you manage with that?
Yeah, so we should mention, like, just for at least for the audience, when we say Palestinian refugee camps, it's very different across the field. So the ones in Jordan, let's say middle of Jordan, it's very different than the one, for example, Gaza camp, which is called officially Jarash camp. Mm-hmm. When you go to Jarash camp, the first time I went there, I remember I stayed for a week. I couldn't eat any meat or like any meat products. And every time I opened the fridge, I was like, why I have this privilege where I went to people's houses and their fridge is completely empty and they have like just olive oil and bread. But if you go to the other camps, it's kind of more the socioeconomic status. They're more exposed to work and elevating their life. They have a citizenship that allow them to pursue their education and work. Whereas the one, I'm just giving an example in refugee camps in Jordan. Whereas the one in Gaza camp or Jarash camp, they're not allowed to have a citizenship. So hence, they can't pursue their education, and even if they had like high scored in high school, they need to find a very good scholarship because then they are count as not a national Jordanian to go to to universities. So their tuition will be like 10 times higher than national. So they can't afford that. They have to go to scholarship and very competitive. It's more of a structural way of living. You are structured by force to live this life in this area. You are forced to work in type of job, the daily job, which is like one day you work, 10 days you don't. Depends on season. You don't have opportunity for education or for, job opportunities or open a business, even like small business for yourself because you're not a citizen. So that's one example in Jordan. But if you go to like West Bank, also this is a different story. And each camp have their own kind of a stamp or different circumstances. So for example, in one of the camps is very, very close to Qalqilia. Just an example, because it's not under the Palestine Authority and it's on UNRWA staff, the environmental department, to clean the streets. And because of lack of funding, you literally walk and you have to put a mask in the camp. But if you go to other refugee camps, it is very condensed. A lot of people, like houses built in like unstructured way, but at least there is like basic like water, electricity, clean, narrow streets that kind of help people kind of quote unquote normal life. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it's kind of more when you go at the beginning, I said it's because of the headquarters, I was exposed to different refugee camps. When you go, for example, in Lebanon, I do remember Buja Barajne, which is very close to Beirut. It's like 15 minutes. I remember I went back to the hotel, I was crying because I was like, this is not any human being should live in this current circumstances. When you walk between the buildings, sometimes you have to like walk this way because the door is like, it's like very narrow. Two people can't walk. And obviously there's no way or like one main street for one car to like go. And like there's a lot of electricity wires and it's not safe and like unhygienic. Hygienic situation is bad. But if you go to like south of Lebanon, like in Saida, close to Saida and Rashidiyya, it's beautiful. They had a great funding from one of the Arab Gulf, and they little like village kind of housing and clean streets and stuff. So, but then those people can't move up or near Beirut, and those one they can't go to the south, and so it's kind of more. It's frustrating for me to see like there's external forces that structure the people to live this way, and they don't have the choice to the way they want. Like whenever I hear the words of like you have to work on yourself and like kind of this Western literature or whatever memes or anything, I was like, this doesn't apply to our people. When you structure people to live in a small area, condensed area, and that's amount of capping their education and capping their working abilities, how then, which is brilliant, and some of them are brilliant, how then they expect from them to raise up? Just kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it's very it was very frustrating for me every time I go back home and see the kind of the different circumstances that refugee camps.
I won't be able to wrap my head around it. So I was in Egypt in November. Of course, we went everywhere. We went for, very affluent areas in Cairo. We went to, very traditional, like Baladi district in Cairo. But those people are living there by choice. Like the government want them to leave Cairo in order for them to clean up Cairo and build more bridges and highways. But those citizens don't want to leave old Cairo because that's where they grew up, basically. So how does that make sense that the article that came out by the Columbia Press blog in 2023, in August 2023, entitled "Why Are Palestinians the World's Most Educated Refugees?" How is that even possible? We addressed it in a couple of episodes, especially our discussion with Dr. Meher Massis. What do you think it drives us to really pursue higher education with such a dehumane, circumstances and lack of resources? How is that even possible, in your opinion?
So, as Noam Chomsky said, I can't quote exactly what he said, but the meaning is they don't have any support from the international community. So I think from my research, I did a lot of qualitative research in refugee camps. Meaning I sat for hours with mothers there. Every single woman I've met or mother, she said, if my children have to finish their education, I don't want them to work as a daily paid job or kind of, low pay job. They need to finish their education. That's our backbone. That's the wall we can lean on. So Noam Chomsky says in all of his books, but mothers in refugee camp know that. They know that. And this is how they put it inside their children's head. So, for example, UNRWA has around 700 schools across the 5 fields. So, from the 50s, the idea was the first thing you do is start on education. And in Gaza, for example, had the lowest illiteracy percentage across the Arab nation. I think it was 97, 98%. So, because if you have your education, you have your degree, that opens doors for you. And I'm quoting my grandmother, personally, going back to personal life, my personal life. My grandmother and her sister knew 3 languages, and my grandmother was literate. She read Quran, she read books. She said, she always used to say to me, when I was like teenager, shahadik slahik. So your degree is your only kind of strongest tool. That's your key to open doors. You have to get your degree. No one will help you as much as your degree. Not your husband, your future husband, not your father, not your brothers. You have to count on yourself. So that's being fed to a teenager girl, where I'm seeing my mother or my aunts, they're all like from both sides, they're all educated, they're all finished, they all work. Because if we don't that, we don't have any other option. And then I believe personally, and that's again from my research with women in refugee camps, we know our heritage. We know we were, we had socioeconomic status that we were elevated, like kind of more urban. We used to go to like ancestors and grandfathers and like grandmas. They went to school. They would have the social status before the war. So they wanted kind of more like kind of subconsciously, they want to transfer there to their generation. So that's why, like, I remember one of the women, she was like in her 80s, when I did my interviews and in-depth interviews in the north of Jordan. I was talking to her about like malnutrition, children, whatever questions. And then all of a sudden she stopped me and like held my hand and she said, "Where are you from? Where do you live?" I was like, "I'm Palestinian." She's like, "Where do you live?" I said, "Amman." And she said, she looked at me in the eyes, I never forget that. She said, don't think you're way better than us. I was like, I'm not, she's like, no, you're very sweet, you're very nice. But I live this life and I live this house because it all started from the Osmani Empire. And then if this is all didn't happen, I would live way better life than you live in Amman because we are landlords. My family owned like massive lands. So I would have finished my education. I would have my children have finished their education. We are structured to live this way, not by choice. And then she kind of like shifted. She's like, "How many children do you have? Is it one child?" I was like, "Why is one child? You have to get more children." I was like, "Go back to the," and that shocked me. And I do remember I quoted her because it's all recorded and you have to quote by qualitative research. I quoted her in my thesis. And on my thesis, I also mentioned that in my older presentation that I did, and I took a consent to take a picture with her and I sent her story because I wanted to share with our faculty at Harvard that don't think that our grandfathers or ancestors, they're kind of like not well educated or they're not exposed. Palestine exists as a state. And they were very well exposed, even if they're not educated, they're exposed to the Mediterranean and other countries, and even there was like urban and schools and universities. So this old woman, like in her 80s, she shared her story, and I remember everyone in the whole room was shocked by her story. And they asked me over and over, please share her story for the audience every time I do a presentation, because that was shocking to hear from an 80 years old saying, you, as a young generation, you got your chance, but us, we didn't get our chance. We're trying our best to give it to our children. But don't think this is our choice. It's not a choice.
That brings me to my question that I asked Dr. Meher Massis. Let's say the Nakba never happened. Do you think that the Palestinian passion for higher education would have had such a boost in drive and aspiration as much as because the Nakba happened. If you look back to the Ottoman Empire, Fatimiyin, and all through the Islamic Arab Empire, we're very passionate about education, discovery, and knowledge. But as 2023, Palestinian refugees are the world's most educated refugees. So what if 1948 never happened? Would we have really pushed so hard to be on a world stage as we are now? Or according to Dr. Meher Massis, he doesn't believe that that would have made any difference. We are always been passionate about education. So in Nakba, might have just gave us a little bit more reason. Regardless, he believes that we would have got that acknowledgement. What do you think?
I do partially agree with him, because it's just like, it wouldn't be, I believe it, maybe we don't know, because, we're just predicting. It would be kind of similar to like Lebanese and Syrian situation, where the communities there, they're perceived kind of push, and like even in Egypt, the most noble, like high Nobel prizes and awards going to Egyptian, like compared to other Arabs, I think. And the Syrians, like, there's a lot of scholars and leaders, and as well as Lebanon. So I'm gonna say probably gonna be the same, or maybe a little bit more, but just because of the exposure, British mandate had like effect on the education system. Also the geographically position of Palestine, if impact their exposure to more to Europe or Turkey and so on. So probably but the thing, I think the urge, or the kind of boost, as you said, or the force inside us, is because of occupation. We don't have anyone to support us except we have to do it all by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I heard it from mothers and my own mom and my aunts and everyone I know. We are by our own. We have to survive. We move on. So we have to move on. Otherwise, and I think if you meet more and more people, and if you meet grassroots people from refugee camp, they would say, we don't like to be victims. There's no chance to be a victim. Like, you can't be, oh, this happened to me. Why? Okay, what's next? How are you going to feed your children or your family? And I say children or family and family, because you have to feed your children and your family, not only your children. Family, like your parents, and like help others. So and I quote Dr. Ali Khadr, he's the one who kind of inspired me during UNRWA, and he took my hand to go to a lot of refugee camps to understand the stories and understand the context, so we can serve them more from headquarter level. He always used to say, if there's one or two person in the family who has higher education, better opportunity, they're gonna feed the whole family and take care of the whole family. That's the kind of the engine or motivation for education. Because again, we got abandoned by the international community, and I can say it over and over again, and we have to focus on, we were structured to live, whether as a Palestinian refugees or non-Palestinian refugees, we are structured to live this way. Our mindset as transgeneration, we are structured to think this way and pursue education as like that's the only chance we have. It's not an option.
It sounds like we're tapping into the traditional tribal connection that we have, even in this modern age in 2025. And I talk to a lot of Palestinian Jordanian families, and they're still, even Egyptians, they're still doing it. They come to the United States, they work really hard, they pursue higher education, they're driven, and, they send their money back home to help other family or even extended family members. So that's part of us. And then add to that the passion for higher education, because as you shared with us, and I mentioned it in other episodes, my dad used to tell me that, A government can come and take your house. A husband can divorce you. Your children might break your heart. You might have to displace yourself by design or by default. But the only thing you cannot lose, it's what's in your mind, which is your knowledge. And he used to say that your education is your invitation to the party. If you highly educated and you have that kind of mindset, the world is gonna start to invite you in because they want to hear what you have to say. They want to listen to your opinion. They want to be inspired by you. So that, like you said, it's always been planted in us. And because of these circumstances, we have no option but to keep moving forward in order to survive and also thrive. And me and Dr. Massis, we shared this thought on the episode that it doesn't matter what kind of Palestinian family you meet or Jordanian Palestinian family you meet, they all have the same story. So I guess the next question is, why Harvard? How did you end up at the Harvard program?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I used to work for I spent 10 years at UNRWA, and part of my work, 40% of my work was research and for two aims: one, advocacy, and policy improvement in terms of health and nutrition status in the health centers across the 5 fields of UNRWA. So, funny story. I feel at least for me, there's small, or short, kind of you meet some people and kind of influence you in a good way and a bad way. So my story with Harvard, why I went to Harvard, it has two sides. One, I was a little bit offended by some of the expats who said well, you did your research, but you still graduated, to the word. She said, you still graduated from, university in Jordan. You're not as if you graduated from Harvard. So, and I was still young back then, but it still kind of stayed with me. But then we had, because of the nature of our work at headquarters, we had a lot of interns, med school students, or even public health master students coming from many universities across the world. Columbia University, Cornell, London School of Hygiene, and also Harvard University as well. So, and there was kind of originally Egyptian med school student who came to do kind of research in mental health, and she was really brilliant. And then I worked with her on she helped me on one of research I'm working on the child policy improvement. So long story short, she kind of helped me with the analysis. It was a very complicated analysis. She took many courses in public health at Harvard, because she's doing her med school and also a master's of public health at Harvard School of Public Health. And it was we were joking around, and I said, well, as if I'm going to take such courses, epidemiological courses at Harvard. She said, why not? You will. Just put it in your head. And I took it lightly, I was laughing. But then, funny, she gave me kind of a kit, a present from, Crimson Harvard, where you have Harvard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then our director, he was a very good mentor for me, to be honest. He said, I want you to go to Harvard. I was but I finished my master's. He said, you always think about out of the box. This is what I like about you. I know if you put it in your head, you will do it. Mm-hmm. And then he started to share with me a lot of courses that done by Harvard, summer courses, short-term courses. So I started with these courses. So I started with Introduction to Clinical Research with Harvard for 8 months course, very intense course. You go to, there was a center at Global Health in Dubai. I went there multiple times. I finished there. And that's when I was exposed to Harvard faculty that encouraged me to pursue a master's. But when I applied, and honestly, I got accepted because of very good recommendation letters from WHO in Emro, in Cairo, and WHO in Geneva, the partners we work on, and a very good recommendation letter from Director of Health, my boss, who was my mentor. I got accepted, but the other obstacle that I had is like, I need a scholarship. I need a full scholarship. It was 2 years program. It's ridiculously expensive. I'm not going to take a loan for that, obviously. So he made sure, he had connection at the faculty, and he made sure I get a scholarship, full scholarship. And that was kind of, I was in a time was like, am I dreaming? Is it going to happen? And even when I got a scholarship, I was like, what am I doing? Why do I want to go back to Harvard and study? I'm married. I have children. Now I have my son, Umar. He was like 3 years old. But honestly speaking, like, I hate to say that. Zaid, my husband, pushed me to do it. And he's like, you're crazy if you don't do it. He said it in his own way, Zaid. You're going to do it. And you're crazy if you don't take this opportunity. And obviously my brother and mother also was a very full support. So I just want to say, like, if it wasn't for my family, I would like have huge doubts to go as a mom with a 2 years old, to stay for 2 years and study master's at Harvard, and was like with the full thing. Like, you have to do your thesis, RRB, courses, stay at midnight, the whole thing, as if you're like, single or you don't have kids. And then that was one of the parts where I'm very glad that I have a very supportive family that treasure and like kind of find education as a very important part of, our identity. So, and the thing is I'm very happy about, I was the first an Arab actually, the first Palestinian to attend this program, Global Health Delivery, at Harvard Medical School.
That's amazing. Now, I know Zaid went to MIT, right, for his master's too?
Yeah, he did a micro-master at MIT.
Okay. Was it the same time? Were you in graduate school at the same time?
No.
The child?
I finished, and then he has a passion supply chain, so he just did something he liked to do. Yeah.
Okay. So you finished Harvard, and then he got into MIT, and he did his degree.
Yes.
Okay.
Supply chain.
And a child. So that's like I said, is a typical setup for the Palestinian passion for education. And what we're trying to do in these episodes is we don't want to be constantly in the echo chamber of the stereotype. We are more than tent living refugees. We are, Palestinian intellect. But these stories are fascinating and so inspiring for the world to find out what ignites us, what is the fuel that drives our engine to pursue higher education. Of course, circumstances, being displaced, and by default, obviously, failure is not an option. Quitting is not an option. Not doing anything about it is not an option. So we are limited with our options, and that motivates us. But also, like we said previously, tapping into the traditional tribal connection, the strong connection we have to our tribe, and our duty to our family, to support our family. And there's a saying in Arabic: if we are in a very good circumstances, our duty is to share that wealth, is to share that blessing, and extend it to our family. And that becomes a multi-generational drive, a multi-generational expectation for the constantly do better and improve our life. Because the last thing we want is just to be stuck behind and being, backwards. We're constantly going forwards. We're constantly want to improve. We're constantly want to do more, which is fascinating in such a small group of people. Because I agree with you. I think the UNICEF have declared in 2016 that Palestinians have, of all the world population, they have a very, very low level of illiteracy. They're very literate. Like your grandmother, you said, how many languages did she speak?
Her sister, she used to speak French, English, and Arabic.
And who taught her that?
She used to go to Bishop School. At school. So that's what I'm saying in the beginning. We had schools, prominent schools. We had very good education sector back then, before the Nakba. So it's not something we kind of, after the Nakba, got introduced to. No. My grandma and her sisters, and specifically this sister, they went to school. My family, Abukishk, they had schools in their 1920 where girls used to attend schools. So not something that we kind of introduced to after the Nakba. We had this kind of longevity where our grandparents, our ancestors treasured. We had the scholars. They treasure education. That's why there's a lot of schools and colleges and universities.
I do agree with you. I think the drive has always been there. It's almost like we're genetically structured for knowledge and discovery. And I mean, through the history, like I said, of the Arabian Empire or the Islamic Empire, because I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, whether you agree with me or not, I believe that also, our faith in God's creation drives us to uncover and discover how much God has created. Yes. And I believe that if you're very spiritual and you're very much connected to the divine, why won't you want to uncover and discover all that fascinating and beautiful things that God have created, and it's unlimited creations out there for us to discover. I think that brings into our passion for knowledge and our passion to discovery is our strong connection to our faith. What do you think? Right? Yeah, exactly. So I think that drive, of you got the world to uncover and discover. And the more we discover and the more we uncover and the more we find proof of the divine creation, how beautiful it is and how fascinating and mystical it is, the stronger our faith is. Don't you agree?
Yes. And just to add on that, I feel like with all scholars and people I met, whether at Harvard, or even back in Jordan, we refuse to be invisible. We believe we are visible. We are there. We, as you said it beautifully, we put ourselves on the world stage. We want to be there. And then I do remember telling my mentor at Harvard, and she thought I'm crazy back then. I told her, I am here. First day I met with her, the first session. And I said, I'm here to publish a paper about Palestinian refugee. The title will have a Palestinian refugee words, and it will be published at Harvard Library, which I did eventually. And then I don't care what the topic is. I want these two words to be at Harvard, because not all of us are Palestinian refugees, but we need to share to the world there are Palestinian refugees. So that's exactly what I told her. I told her I don't care the topic, even if it was about watermelon. I want to publish my paper at Harvard Library, and then I want to publish it in a very prominent journal that has your affiliation, your name on it, which I did. That was my kind of goal all the time, because during my master's, COVID hit, and I remember I had Omar. He was 2.5 years old, so I had the goal, I need to publish my paper. I need to finish my thesis to be at Harvard Library.
That's incredible. So in your experience, there are Palestinian in Jordan that, for example, my father's family, my paternal family, they were never displaced out of Palestine or Nablus. They went from central Syria into Transjordan, used to be during the, Jordan during the Ottoman Empire in the mid 17th century. And then they became a cavalryman for the Jordanian, army, and helped Jordan to regain Jabal al-Urdun, a mountain of Jordan, and they settled in Nablus, Syrian, and they settled in Nablus, and from Nablus they ended up going into Salt in Jordan. So my paternal family were not displaced because of the conflict or war. My mom is from Salt, the tribal of Jordan. So did you see from interacting with that type of Palestinian Jordanian compared to Palestinians that have been displaced by default because of their circumstances into Jordan, the difference in their mentality towards education?
Yes, in general speaking. Generally speaking, yes. Because again, it's if you don't have this backbone, if you don't have this wall to lean on, what's your other option? In like generally speaking, or across the world, if you have a tribal community, strong tribal community rooted for years and decades, you subconsciously, like if I fall, someone will raise me up. You don't need to be like in higher end of socioeconomic status, right? So we know this subconsciously and even consciously, where people who didn't lose their wealth or root connection, versus those who lost it. We are by ourselves, by our own. So we that's where our parents, I believe, and like us, millennials or next generation, we kind of build what we have, build a life, decent life, with better education, better lifestyle, better circumstances, and any opportunities there, we grab it. And we have to embrace any opportunities that we have, whether education, work, anything. We have to embrace it.
We have no other choice but to make something out of it. This is our lifeline, basically. And that's what my dad said, is that's your ticket to the invitation to the party. So the last thing I would like to ask you is what would be your advice? Now you're born in the United States, grew up in Jordan, came back to the United States. What would advice you would give to a young Palestinian female that is pursuing higher education to come to the United States?
I was asked actually this question before, and I always say, when you have negative energy in the room or negative thoughts imposed on you or any comments, just close your ears. Don't listen. The second thing, always think about outside the box. Nothing is impossible. And I quote a lot of my mentors. They said, "You're a young woman who kind of went to Harvard, got a full scholarship. A lot of Americans and Westerns would never have this opportunity. You did it by yourself. You embraced any opportunity. I knocked a lot of doors. I wasn't shy to do it because I want you to do this to myself, to my family, and to my community. I wanted to be the first Palestinian in that program specifically. So I would say, one, be focused. Focus on the path you want to achieve, whether it's a business, career, education, whatever it is. Two, be careful, conscious who you listen to and what impacts your thoughts, your passion. And three, surround yourself with correct people.
That's exactly what Dr. Massis have said on the episode. The beauty about his father, his dad wasn't that traditional, Arab that want him to be a doctor. He said, I don't really care what your passion is. And if you want to be a cook, but be the best cook. If you want to be a poet, be the best poet. If you want to be a teacher, be the best teacher. He grew up in Dhahran in Saudi Arabia, and his dad worked in Aramco. He was a workaholic, all day. And then at nighttime, he will give English lessons. So he did not put a lot of pressure on him to become a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. He goes, I don't care what you do, just do something. Yeah. But like you said, be passionate about it, do the best in it, be the best cook, be the best poet, be the best teacher, and pursue your passion. But as a female Palestinian that would embark on coming to the United States and with such a different custom and different culture, what do you think will be the most challenging about being here as a Palestinian female?
I would say, one, it would be self-doubt. We don't like to say that to ourselves, but we know. At the beginning, it's going to be self-doubt. Am I going to make it? I'm competing with the locals. I'm competing with those who've been here, like Americans who've been here for decades, their families here. And then I always say that when you're a student at any university, at whether Harvard or MIT or whatever, the perception or people, how they perceive you is different, or the kind of engagement with people, networking with the locals or the faculty or anyone or international students is very different than when you go and start working. It's kind of you're competing with their opportunity. We say it in Arabic, بتشارك رزقهم. That's a different perspective. That's a different treatment. And that's when you have to on focus. You have to be very focused. I can do it. I'm better. I will survive. I don't have any option. And close, like I always, this is mentally, I always close any kind of negative energy or any kind of self-doubt. Close it, focus on step by step. Like anything I want to achieve, take it step by step, do it the best I can and go to the next one. Do it the best I can and go to the next one. Even if it takes time, a lot of time. I don't care. I have to finish every milestone in my career or life perfect as I can. And last thing I want to say to all women, because not all of them work or finish education when they, immigrated to US or any Western countries. I love when I see a lot of young women or mothers who focus on their children. So even if you're not working, it doesn't mean like if you're immigrating, you have to work and be successful. No. If you only focus on your children, their identity, where they're from, embrace their strengths, work on their weaknesses, self-confident. If you do this to yourself, to your community, to us, an Arab or Palestinian, you did the best thing you could ever do for us. Because this is my aim to my children. I want them to be successful in any career path they take, doesn't matter. But I want them, as you said, I want them to be on the table. And that was like what a lot of women or mothers I meet, they take this on their shoulder and they do it on their children. Like that's kind of empowerment that I love when I see.
So it sounds like it's that process of transfer of power, we call it. The transfer of power to our children, to the new generation. I never birthed any children. I don't have kids, but I have seen it in so many different families, whether Jordanian, Palestinian, Lebanese here in the United States, or especially Egyptians, that transfer of power, it's the same immigrant story. We got to transfer the power, that mission, got to transfer the power, that mindset, got to transfer power to our children to lead on after we are passing in order to continue that legacy of passion for education. Quitting is not an option. Not doing anything is not an option. Not getting an education not an option. Stagnation, I always say, stinks. Stagnant water stinks and starts smelling. You have to constantly be moving. That's how you grow. If you know, you'll grow more. Knowledge means growth. And especially when I came here in the United States, I was very familiar with the United States. I had the option to either go to Jordan for my undergrad or come to the States, and I chose the United States because I just identify with the United States a lot more, because when I was in Jordan, I was just a visitor. I never lived there. I spent more time in Saudi and the United States than I ever spent in Jordan. But still, even though I identify with the American culture, and it's like, that's a piece of cake. I'm going to hit the ground running. When I go in there, it's going to be a lot easier for me to navigate through the culture because I'm just so familiar with it. But I did go through a certain period of trying to get approved by the culture, by the society, and it becomes an addiction. And I asked Dr. Massis about it. Do you believe that as a Palestinian immigrant, when we get displaced, either by default or by design, meaning that coming from refugee camps, having to have an education, fortunate to have an education here, or display ourselves by design, meaning that being Palestinian Jordanian, living in Jordan very comfortably, but it's like, you know what? I have an opportunity to pursue higher education. I'm going to go to the United States. Do you think that we overcompensate because we are always been under the spotlight of that stereotype? Oh, you're nobody. Just like that lady that told you, that you don't have a Harvard education. You just have a degree from University of Amman in Jordan. And I agree with you. We should cancel the noise. I totally believe in that. Cancel the noise and stay with your own vortex and vibration in order to manifest all the dreams and the achievement you would like to achieve. But we do overcompensate. We almost have to work harder than anybody else in order to overshine to be noticed. But that can also tap into approval addiction. We are very addicted to be approved because also our traditional tribal connection or our traditional gender role expectations from our culture, it's all about being approved by our grandparents, our aunts and uncle and parents, so we can pass on that transfer of power to our children. Did you go through that when you came to the United States, whether approval addiction? Do you feel like you had to overcompensate when you were at Harvard in that program as a Palestinian female?
Of course. I wouldn't say addiction, but yes. When you're sitting and talking about like your work at UNRWA and you see some students just leave the room, look at you in your face and leave the room, how would this make you feel? So it's not like I wanted to be approved. I wasn't welcome. I had one of my friends cohort, in the cohort I had. She said, "I think you're in the wrong university as a Palestinian." Paul Farmer. I asked him. Paul Farmer, he was the assistant dean for the Harvard Medical School. And I asked him, you give all the students like recommendation, like books to read, connections. When I asked you asked me, what do you think? He didn't give me any recommendation. He took me to like a side and he said, well, he was a very brilliant, passionate, amazing person. He passed away. And he said, well, I am embarrassed to say it, but this side of the river, he means the side of medical school, the Charles River, they either don't care or they don't want to get involved. But the other side of the river is a different case. So
it to be approved by somebody.
I knew I wasn't welcome. And then it was like, I think the stubborn part of me was like, you don't welcome me? Well, I'm going to piss you off. Every time I have a chance to raise my hand and say, I'm from UNRWA, Palestinian refugee, I love it, get out of the room. If you feel offended, please get out.
Yeah. Wow. So you would think that it shouldn't happen in such an Ivy League school, but I guess there are people that have their own.
Well, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this country over 36 years, and for me, education and knowledge should not discriminate, should not be, for just certain people. If you have the mindset, if you have the urge, if you have the drive, if you have the potential, go for it. That's science, that's knowledge. It should be colorless. It should be, regardless of your religion background or ethnic background. But it is, I cannot get over, and the more I discover about Palestinian intellect, the more I find the unlimited mindset by eliminating limited beliefs. And I think that's one of the secrets of the Palestinian, passion about higher education. It's the unlimited mindset. And when I meet with you guys and I interview you, of course, I know you in personal level, but when I get to really know the essence of your passion towards education, of course, having my dad part of my life, he was very, very passionate. And he implanted in us that, the best thing that I can give you is education. And he used to tell me I have two jobs before I leave this life is to feed you and give you education. That's it. The money can be lost. You can lose your house. You can displace yourself. You can move to another country. But the best thing I can do is just to give you education. Then I can rest in peace. So we have reached to the end of our hour. I just want to thank my dearest friend Nada for joining us today. I was a special gift on Discovering Palestinian Intellect on this Mindset Mastery Moment. And I would like to remind you guys that these episodes are uploaded every single week on Wednesdays on Spotify and the Apple Podcast platform. And also it is available for you to watch as a video on the Greenwood Dental Partners YouTube channel. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click on the notification button in order not to miss any episodes. And please remember, if you like our contacts, to leave us the comments, the questions, any topics that you would like us to discuss on this platform. So thank you so much, Nada, for coming in, and thank you guys for listening and hanging out with us through this hour. And remember, we are more than tent living refugees. We are Palestinian Intellect. This is Slava the Jordanian.